In the summer of 2013, I first got into Source Filmmaker. At the time, I was very excited to discover what I could do with it compared to what I had been doing previously, which was just shoot still images of Sonic action figures over a green blanket, crudely replace that green blanket with a purer green in Microsoft Paint, and then plaster it over my background footage, which mostly consisted of Gmod screenshots, while using basic chroma keying to remove that green. One of the very first things I did in Source Filmmaker was make an animation involving fulfilling what I saw as completely lost potential regarding Tails' twin tails, using them to strangle an opponent. This would not be the only time I did this though. Because of the first iteration of SFM's emphasis on Team Fortress 2 assets, I ended up plastering some of the assets there, which gave me an idea to turn this pilot scene into a full-blown series. Here, Sonic, Tails, and Silver would join Team Blue, and Eggman, Eggrobo, and Metal Sonic would end up joining Team Red. Of course, this series would be called Sonic and Team Fortress 2. Meanwhile, back in Gary's mod, I discovered a spaceship map which inspired me to make a space adventure themed series as well. And then, after also being inspired by parts of the Downfall green screen pack from the Silver Universe, as well as his Llama Priest series, I decided to add all that onto my previous Downfall parody obsession with having Hitler and his crew hunt Sonic down, and conceived the idea of another new series involving Sonic and his friends in space with Hitler and his crew planning to strike them down. The working title of this series would be Sonic Space Adventures Against Hitler, with the intention of replacing it with something shorter and better. But unfortunately, by the time I was ready to make the series, I couldn't think of anything better, so the working title stuck as the official title. My original intentions were to have both series be continuing series, with each having at least 50 or even 100 half-hour episodes. On top of that, Sonic and Team Fortress 2 was going to be the more comedic, lighter tone series, while Sonic Space Adventures Against Hitler was going to be the more serious, darker tone series. I began work on Sonic and TF2 first, and within less than a month of getting into SFM, I worked on an intro, some title screens, transition bumpers, and the first 3 parts of the first episode, where Sonic and Tails consider joining Team Blue, and Eggman considers joining Team Red. Unfortunately, the series was ultimately cancelled after my younger sister had some mean things to say about my voice impression of the administrator.
I see that you've all followed their message. I am the administrator. I announce ongoing state of battles on a battle intercom. Here at Builders League United, you will use your skills to help us outwit reliable excavation demolition and win our war against them. I have already looked into your skills before you came in here, and I think they will help you with our mission to win our war.
After finishing the administrator's first scene, I was intending to have her spontaneously switch voices afterwards for the in-universe reason of the old one being too terrible, in line with the comedic tone of the series, but the damage to my self-esteem regarding this series had already been done. Even though I was incredibly quick to get started on Sonic and Team Fortress 2, I couldn't say the same for Sonic Space Adventures Against Hitler. I did make progress in late October by making a couple teaser posters for myself, as well as a couple other prototype Gmod screenshots out of fascination over what was going to happen in episode 2. But nothing significant enough came to be until a few days after Christmas 2013. Up until that point, I had an Acer Aspire laptop from 2011 as my main machine, which replaced my 2007 Dell Inspiron Slim desktop. Why a laptop after spending my whole entire life on consumer desktops? Because I needed one for a gaming club I wanted to join during my last year at high school. After really getting into Steam gaming the same time I got into SFM, I bought the PC version of Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed, but it performed horribly on this laptop. This was my main motivation for me to finally get myself a gaming desktop, and it was that point where I finally got started on truly making Sonic Space Adventures Against Hitler. At this point, my intentions were still on making this a continuous series. The in-universe reasoning for having the Sonic characters stay in space indefinitely would be that they forgot to bring any of the Chaos Emeralds, which would normally propel their spaceship at faster than light speeds. Episode 1 of Sonic Space Adventures Against Hitler was completed on January 12th, 2014. This series would be an improv series. Whatever ideas I had in my head, I would put in right away. This would prove to lead to a very pivotal decision I made after I had a character die in episode 2 and I wanted to bring her back, partly because I didn't want characters dying this early on. I decided that the built-in resurrection machines would need Chaos Emeralds to power them, since even I can't have resurrections happen too easily, and because of this, I ended up placing a Chaos Emerald in an inconspicuous location on the ship, and once it was found, it would be used to power the resurrection machine and ultimately bring that character back to life. Because of this, I decided that just one Chaos Emerald being found wouldn't be enough. And because the Chaos Emeralds would end up making the spaceship go way too fast for the series to be continuous, I ultimately came to the pivotal decision to turn this continuing series into a 10-episode miniseries instead, and each of the remaining Chaos Emeralds would be found one by one throughout the majority of the whole thing. Episode 2 would be completed on February 2nd, with Episode 3 following on February 20th, Episode 4 on April 7th, Episode 5 on April 27th, and Episode 6 on May 25th. Then on June 16th, 2014, as I was working on Episode 7, I made and published a Downfall parody prologue and announcement video for this whole miniseries project, asking official Untergangers to know about this since I saw it as a big deal, and the 10th anniversary of the release of the movie Downfall was coming up. At the same time, I wasn't so sure if it made sense for me to release either the first or last episode on Downfall's 10th anniversary date. Just like an actual TV show, I really wanted to upload the episodes on a weekly basis, and if I wanted to upload the last episode on that milestone date, I would have to hustle and release the first episode on July 7th. However, uploading the first episode on that date would give me more time to finish the miniseries. Even though I asked my viewers what I should do, nobody responded, and I ultimately chose to upload the first episode on that date. But that decision would turn out to be completely unnecessary. Episode 7 would be completed on June 28th, Episode 8 on July 21st, Episode 9 on August 17th, and finally, Episode 10 just 11 days later on August 28th. At the time, I couldn't upload any videos to YouTube that are over 15 minutes long, so I started a Vimeo account just to upload this miniseries. On September 8th, 2014, Downfall's 10-year anniversary, I uploaded Episode 1 of Sonic Space Adventures Against Hitler to my Vimeo page, and each subsequent episode was released on a weekly basis as I intended. Since then, I verified my YouTube account and removed my 15-minute video limit, and since the Vimeo uploads were obviously not getting enough views, I uploaded Episode 1 to my YouTube channel just over a year after my Vimeo upload. Unlike on Vimeo, however, subsequent uploads were uploaded on a more irregular but more frequent basis. At the time, Hitler Rants Parodies' first contest was well underway, and since the main guideline was to make the greatest Downfall parody you've ever made, I intended on entering the whole miniseries into the contest, but since I wasn't allowed to submit multiple entries, at least that's what I think I was told, and despite me telling them to give out spoiler warnings, I ended up submitting just the 10th episode to the contest, since I believed it was the best and most well-made episode out of them all. It would ultimately get 4th place in the contest. A lot has happened since the release of SSAAH. First, because my female voice impressions were being mocked, I ended up asking actual separate voice actors to voice their equivalents in some of my future Sonic shorts, and the long-term results were quite mixed. But then after Source Filmmaker was growing more and more outdated, and more Sonic fan short creators switched to more capable 3D animation software, I decided to pitch in and switch to Blender in October 2019, with Blaze's Birthday being the very last Sonic short I ever released that was made in SFM, premiering on YouTube on December 14th, 2018, my 25th birthday. Last year, I decided to combine all 10 episodes of the miniseries into one feature-length cut, and on September 8th, 2021, I released that cut onto Google Drive for all of you to download and enjoy. At the time, I made this cut out of previously uploaded episode files with baked-in music and problems with frame rate conversions when putting 24 FPS SFM recordings into a 30 FPS episode file, as well as problems with my video editor's audio encoding at the time. Some of the changes in the changelog for that cut were made as just patches because I believed the original RAW files were lost due to the loss of a crucial backup, and I did the best I possibly could to get the best quality out of what I had at the time. You see, in late 2018, I was over 2 years into my transition to desktop Linux, and after hearing about its benefits from Linux elitists on YouTube, I actually intended to gradually transition away from Windows over to Linux with a Windows dual boot, eventually over to Linux full time. But after wanting to get rid of my Linux install after being unsatisfied, I bricked my computer, which was actually a result of me putting my Linux bootloader onto my main Windows drive and putting my Linux installation onto a separate drive from the very beginning of my transition. All I wanted to do was to wipe the bootloader off of my main drive and restore it back to normal. And even when I live streamed that event out of rage, even I knew that it was a terrible decision for me to have put my bootloader on the main drive. This isn't a storage drive failure, as one commenter suggested. It's just complete incompetence on my part on how Linux works, and I knew I could have done better in the first place. And after I decided to try Linux again later that year, I encountered another issue I had there, which I couldn't remember, and I hastily reformatted the drive, which ended up wiping most of all of my past legacy video projects throughout my entire life. Now, I did have another network backup owned by one of my parents, but I wiped that too, but in that case, it was because it was running low on storage, and I wanted to start a brand new backup there from scratch. I was so devastated when I reformatted the drive and trashed these past projects to history. I thought my life was completely over. This is me IRL when trying to recover the data using ext4 recovery software. But all that was to no avail, and after several more attempts to give desktop Linux another shot, the latest being in spring 2021, being unable to play and record at the same time in Audacity was the last straw. This time, I actually solemnly swore, oath and everything, to never use desktop Linux ever again, especially after I heard Scally call it the Dunning-Kruger OS. The loss of that backup back in 2018 made me believe that all of my SSAAH Raw files were also completely wiped away, and I believed that this feature-length cut of the miniseries I made last year was the absolute best I could ever make from all that I had left. Well, earlier this year, I was asked by my dad to clean house the network backup drive he had as it was getting really full. As I didn't want anything from that drive to be completely gone to history, I decided to thoroughly look through that drive to see if there was anything worthwhile keeping and not just blindly deleting. And lo and behold, there it was in one of the older backup folders I didn't wipe back in 2018 for some reason. Most of the original RAW project and audio files of the miniseries have been left completely intact. And now that I know how proper video encoding works since the release of the original miniseries, this amazing discovery had single-handedly enabled me to make a much higher quality, more thought-out remastered cut than the, quite frankly, overcopied nature of 2021's feature-length cut. As I said in my announcement community post, I would be reassembling the whole cut from scratch, frame for frame, cut for cut, using all of the RAW project files I could use, making this whole thing as pure as I possibly can. But then, after initially being unable to find a couple background images for episode 1, I decided to recreate their respective shots using completely different assets in Blender. Then I thought, why stop there? I also decided to use higher quality and sometimes different sources in place of their inferior quality originals. And even then, after finding out that I have been making enough changes to this feature cut, I decided to go all the way and go George Lucas on this whole thing and make quite a few other changes that I feel would improve the experience in my mind. So even though I was initially considering this to be just version 2.0 of the feature cut of Sonic Space Adventures Against Hitler, I'm beginning to think that saying that would be a complete understatement. So now consider this new version, Sonic Space Adventures Against Hitler, Special Edition. And it is now available on Google Drive, just like the old version was. Where's the old version? Well, unfortunately, I had to take it down because uploading the new version here, in addition to the old version, would take up too much space on G Drive's free tier, and I had to replace it with the newer version. But don't worry, the old version is still safe and sound with me, and I won't be subjecting it to any more rage-inducing backup losses, just like so many other past projects of mine. So now, just like before, click the link in the description to go to the newly updated page where you can download the brand new multi-part zip file, one part at a time. I was initially intending on combining tutorial footage from my older video with new footage of any updates to the tutorial process, while unlisting, privatizing, or even deleting the older video. But then I found out that the older video still has quite a few insightful notes, so I will be leaving it up and having you go there and visiting these time codes for the tutorial on how to unzip it and integrate it with Kodi and Plex respectively. Besides, I don't want this video to go on any longer than it already is. The catch here this time is that there will be a couple of updates that you will have to abide by as follows. The password to this updated zip file has also been updated to be more secure so that it would be far more unlikely for anyone to redistribute without my permission. I know my old file may not have been broken in yet, but with such an easy to remember password, I don't want to take any more chances. So, here's my warning once again. Do not re-upload or even sell anything in this pack without my permission. First of all, fan edits should never be bought or sold. Also, there's a reason anti-piracy views exist, especially for indie creators like myself. Re-uploading anything you don't own without the original owner's permission is ethically and morally wrong. This is why I have been far more aggressive with crediting all the assets I have used here than before. And before I show you this new password, just keep in mind, do not copy this password and redistribute it anywhere, even with my permission. Got it? Okay, here's the new password for just a split second. The changelog to this version of the feature cut is so long that covering every change would take up too much time, as if this video itself isn't taking up too much time already. Besides, due to me reassembling the entire cut from scratch, there is no way for me to cover every single change, since quite a few of them are changes I won't even remember changing, they are so insignificant. But in the same location as the multi-part zip file of the movie itself, you will see a Google Doc of the changelog where you can view the biggest changes both overall and on each individual episode. However, I would still like to share with you the biggest changes worth sharing in video in the overall category. The biggest and most important change of all is, of course, the fact that the aforementioned newly found RAW files have been used. Why is that a big deal? Well, when I was first making V1.0 of this cut, I was implementing some of the patch-like changes to it when I noticed that the whole entire miniseries had horrible encoding. This was a result of me rendering each project file at 24 frames per second, and when I encoded them in the video editor I was using at the time, I didn't know anything about changing project settings from using the default 30 FPS encoding to a more proper 24 FPS encoding, and 1080p encoding was only available in MPEG, so when I encoded them, it would come out incredibly stuttery because of this terrible encoding. Thanks to my newfound knowledge on how encoding works, however, the special edition will be perfectly encoded, and it will look so smooth, so beautiful. And I did not just find raw video files. I also found raw SFM.dmx project files as well. At first I didn't want to use them because I already have all the raw video files, but after a few test renders of the smallest DMX file in episode 1, I decided to go all the way and re-render every one of the project files as image sequences and use those instead of the video files. Well, actually, I was only able to re-render the found project files with all the necessary assets I could track down. Others weren't so lucky, so there are a few scenes and shots where the only source material was the original heavily compressed WMV video files, and I used color grading to turn the shadows up by 24% and the highlights down by 12% to fit together with the image sequences. Well, as I later found out, I dumped out the original video files that were originally rendered, and I actually originally used the heavily compressed WMV converted files by Freemake, not only because I was more familiar with WMV than even MP4, but also because I wanted to make the project files as small as possible, regardless of quality. How can I tell now? Well, I still have a couple leftover original raw video renders, and when comparing them to the compressed WMVs, it only proved just how much I did not give a fuck about video quality back then. But now, even though the newly rendered image sequences took up nearly half a terabyte, as a more competent video editor than ever before, it was so worth it. As I said before, I rediscovered nearly all of the raw project and video files of Sonic Space Adventures Against Hitler, but it's not just that. I also rediscovered quite a few bonus goodies made along the way, including a making-of documentary of the first episode of the miniseries back when I first made it, but never released, and also everything to do with the cancelled Season 2. All that will be released as extras with this new release. One thing to note about the making-of documentary, however, is that I shot it all on my first-gen iPad Air and edited it in iMovie for iPad. Just wanted to give you a heads up on the editing quality in that bonus feature. On top of the newly improved half dub, which at this point is now a full dub, I was considering doing an audio commentary for this movie, detailing everything that was involved in every scene and every shot, but as I found out, I can't quite do so in a spontaneous manner without either stammering, going silent for a few minutes, or even pausing the movie out of sheer nervousness. Now, combine that with a 4-hour runtime, there is physically no way I can do all this in one go. This is why I don't do live streams anymore. But if you really want me to make an audio commentary, give me already done examples of scripted film commentary, and character commentaries don't count, in the comments, and then I'll get to work on it that way, and I will update the multi-part zip file with the updated MKV file with the added scripted commentary track. Whether you've made it this far without skipping, or you have skipped to this chapter without watching the rest, I have a very important announcement regarding my Downfall parody status, and to be quite frank, all of my non-Sonic work. My last new Downfall parody was uploaded around 2.5 years ago. Even then, I had been running out of parody ideas for a long while, and since then, I also gradually lost the motivation to make them, on top of the meme itself slowly dying in my mind. So today, I am officially announcing my retirement from not only Downfall parody making, but also Angry German Kid parody making and YouTube poop making, since those video categories have also been mostly outviewed by a lot of my Sonic content. Technically speaking, Sonic Space Adventures Against Hitler Special Edition will end up being the very last Downfall parody I will ever make, though it's really just a remaster of something I made back in 2014. My last new Downfall parody was made back in early 2020, about 420 Day, but after those last two, I got nothing anymore. I will continue to enjoy rewatching older Downfall parodies, whether they were made by myself or other Untergangers, but after this announcement, I will be deleting all of my Downfall parody sources from my projects drive. Don't worry, I still have them backed up just in case, and I sure as hell won't subject it to another rage reformatting, but this truly marks the end of Downfall parody making or Unterganging for me. As for YouTube poops, I will continue to watch newer ones whenever I need a big laugh, especially from collabs, and I will continue to imagine made-up, micro-sized YTPs in my head, but that last George of the Jungle YTP from New Year's Day 2020 will be the last YTP I will ever actually make. As for Angry German Kid, that meme is even deader than Downfall parodies, not to mention the amount of stress it gave the original actor. Today, out of the many Angry German Kid parodies I made since 2010, and a fraction of them being on my YouTube channel throughout its history, only 3 remain public, 4 if you count that SSAAH clip upload, including the last new one I made from October 2015. I say new because the last real Angry German Kid parody I ever made was actually a higher quality remake of my most viewed AGK parody from 2012, which was uploaded exclusively to my Vimeo page because I don't want a near duplicate YouTube upload from what I already had, and I also don't want to lose all of the old ones' views and comments. Man, I always seem to retire from parody making with remakes of my older parodies. And on top of that, I don't get nearly as much of an urge to rewatch Angry German Kid parodies as I do to rewatch even Downfall parodies, so this parody category will be hit the hardest by this retirement from non-Sonic content. The last thing I'm announcing my retirement from is using Source Filmmaker. Since I first moved to Blender, even though I didn't want to use SFM as my main animation software anymore, despite some growing pains, I decided to keep my SFM installation on my games drive anyway, just so I could download some Steam Workshop assets and port them over to Blender. Well, since I now have more than enough ported Blender assets to carry on with animating, not to mention the fact that I can now model in the same program I animate in, with much more realized results than just picking the best looking asset the workshop gives me, I will finally be deleting my SFM installation after this announcement, with the very last thing I ever made there being the re-rendered image sequences in SSAAH Special Edition. Today marks the 10-year anniversary of the day I first opened my YouTube channel, and what a better time for me to finally put in my next minor channel rebrand. My last major rebrand from mid-2019 still used some new SFM footage mere months before I began my transition to Blender. Well, now, this new branding will use 100% all Blender footage, beginning with my new channel banner and channel avatar as well. Now, this new channel avatar is designed to be variable in the way that it may actually change characters and logo variations over time, and I plan on making more versions in the future, but I am not quite so sure if I could think of any opportunities or even motivation to change my avatar in this manner, let alone on all of my social media handles in time. A new trailer for this rebrand is also coming soon, but since I don't place nearly as much priority on making YouTube trailers as I do for YouTube channel avatars and banners, and channel trailers aren't really required to exist, it may come a bit later on than the rebrand itself, but it will come soon enough. And now, to close out this video, the new default ASF intro.